How are we doing this morning? All right. Making sure you're there. I don't know if I'm sleeping or you sleeping. Like, where are we at this morning? All right. We have a Bible. We're going to be in John chapter 4 this morning. John chapter 4 is where we're going to spend our morning. And my wife and I lived in North Carolina for about 2.5 years before we moved home to Plant Redemption Church about almost 10 years ago now. And when we moved there, we had a golden retriever named Brinkley, and he loved water. And so he was used to swimming in Lake Michigan. And so I was convinced to find him a place to go swimming in Raleigh. So I did a little online search and found a place near a lake called Falls Lake, right, to take him swimming. It was a half-mile little small hike through the woods in the southern heat in the middle of summer. It was sweltering out there. It's really terrible. And but we finally got to the spot where my dog could go swimming. The things I'll do for my dog, right? Steph was back in Michigan at the time. It was just him and I. And so we went on this journey together. And it was described online as having these huge, like, flat rocks that the dog could go swim on. You could kind of hang out on. And so we came out of the woods out to the spot where all these huge flat rocks were, like these really incredible looking place. And I'm like, this will be great. Just him and I kind of hanging out. And we get out there, and my greatest fear became reality. There were snakes everywhere. I don't know about you, but I'm terrified of snakes. And the color of the snakes was yellow, black, and red, all of them, and they're all curled up in the heat on these hot boulders. And I couldn't remember the saying in the moment about what you need to know when you live in the South about poisonous snakes. But the saying is this: red against yellow and you're a dead fellow. Black against red and you're okay, Jack. I didn't know who Jack was, but I knew this: I got to get out of here, right? And so Brinkley and I'm like, Brinkley, I didn't have my nose. I'm like, come here. And he listened, and we kind of ran, like, to get out of there. And it was, what was happening within me was really bad, right? It was really bad. My greatest fear became reality in that moment. Question for you: what is your greatest fear? What is your greatest fear? We all have fears, and to be honest, for most of us, there's fears that are greater than running into a snake, or if you don't like spiders, there's greater fears than that, right? Maybe for you, your greatest fear would literally be facing the unknown. Maybe for you, the greatest fear would be your future, or a specific situation where you can't control the outcome that you would desire. Maybe for you, your greatest fear is losing a relationship or a friendship that you've had for a long time. Maybe for you, your greatest fear is looking in the mirror and seeing your own struggles. Maybe for you, your greatest fear is related to safety for you and your family, or the loss of a job, or maybe you fear death. Maybe you fear abandonment, or you fear failure, or you fear being found out. You see, if we could be honest, we all have all sorts of kinds of fears. This manifesto series is a vision over our church. It's a vision that speaks to the things that we're about as a church, but we haven't arrived in any of them. There's work to be done. Like, there's growth that can be had as a church family. But today we're going to process priority number 2 for our church, which is every person known. And today we're going to see something awesome. And are you ready to hear the awesomeness of this text that we're going to look at? This morning we're going to see this, that we are safe to be known by one another because we're all known by God. Isn't that not a beautiful thing? We're safe to be known by one another because we're fully known, every part of our life, by God. And so we're going to be in John 4, but before we jump in, let's take a moment and pray, okay? Jesus, I want to thank you for your word and this story that we're going to look at this morning. And I just want to confess to you that this story is still a work in progress in my heart, so I pray that your Spirit will give clarity to our church family this morning. And Lord, this is a value, every person known, that is one that we want to strive towards as a church family. Lord, so many people here are known in our church. There's nothing to hide anymore. Yet that's not true of everybody. Lord, we want to be a church where everyone is known. And so I just want to pray, Lord, that will you do a work in us today that will just shape the culture of our church going forward. In your name, amen. Let's take a look at the text this morning. We're going to pick it up in verse 7 of John chapter 4. It says, a woman from Samaria came to draw water. And Jesus said to her, give me a drink, for his disciples had gone into the city to buy food. And the Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. And Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God, who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. And the woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock. And Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. Whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never thirst again, and the water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And the woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water. So we're picking up the story in John chapter 4 with Jesus traveling towards Galilee. And a verse that we didn't read is the phrase found in verse 4 where it says this about Jesus. He had to pass through Samaria. Why did Jesus have to pass through Samaria? Here's what we know on Jesus. He's always in the exact place that he actually needs to be. Every time he's where he needs to be. Always on time. But here's what's true. The text has pointed out for us that Jews avoid Samaritans at all costs. No matter what, they're going to avoid Samaritans. They view Samaritans as half-breeds. Why? Because here's what happened. There's a group of Jews that married Babylonians or Canaanites, and so they compromised their faith, and it gave birth to a new line, which is the Samaritans. And so the Jews believe that their line has been contaminated by these people. You see, the Jews, they believe that they're superior and the Samaritans are inferior. The Jews believe that they are better and the Samaritans are lower. They were right and the Samaritans were wrong. And because of that, there's barriers that now exist. Significant barriers, but here's what we're going to see this morning. There is no barrier, zero barriers that the gospel can't break through. Zero. And so in John chapter 4, this is a divine appointment for Jesus. This is a divine appointment for a woman who's going to come to this well as she does every day. There's a life that needs to be changed. There's someone who needs to interact with the good news of the gospel. And when this woman arrives at the well, there certainly is a cultural barrier. There is a gender barrier. There's a moral barrier. There's now a racial barrier. But Jesus doesn't care about barriers. He cares about hearts. And he's going to do what he has to do to break through this woman. And so I can't help but wonder, as this woman had a divine appointment with Jesus, how many people in the room this morning are here today? God's ordained you to be here to have a divine encounter with him. He wants you to know that whatever barriers you walked in with this morning, he can break any and all of them. And so what is your greatest fear? Let me tell you what I think our greatest fear is. And if it's not number one, it's going to be in the top 5 for sure. I think our greatest fear, being born and kind of raised in this area, is rejection. Rejection. That we would be fully known. And what we receive back from people that fully know us is that we're unloved. We're unloved. So verse 7, it says, a woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. What time is Jesus at this well? Jesus is at the well at the 6th hour. He's at the well at noon. And so this woman's coming to the well in the heat of the day. Why is she coming in the heat of the day? Well, it's because she's been rejected by everyone around her. You see, this woman has made some really poor choices in her life. And so she's coming in the middle of the day because she can't come with other women. And so the other women come in the morning when it's cool. They get the water they need for the day to do their chores, to take care of their family, but not this woman. She's got to come when no one else will actually be there, because this whole woman's life has been defined by her past. Anyone else in the room relate with that? That your life has been defined by your past? This woman has made some really bad choices. She has failed miserably, and for some reason, everybody knows this woman's dirty laundry. So she's been rejected because of her choices. So imagine how people talk about her. Imagine how people might look at her. Imagine how people might stare at her and speak behind her back. Oh, that's the woman that did. Ever experienced that in church world? Some of you have. You've been hurt by the church. You've been rejected by the church. And while this often will happen in our culture, I just want to be clear with our church, this cannot happen at Redemption Church. I don't care what your struggle is. You're welcome here. I don't care the choices that you've made in your life. You're welcome here. There's a seat for you here. Our culture will cancel people. We don't cancel people here, right? And the reason we don't is because if anyone's going to be canceled, I should be canceled, and you should be canceled, right? So is it possible that just like this woman, we all have a story? You say, I wonder if there's anyone here whose life's been defined by your past. It's made up of a history of some really good choices and maybe a history of some really bad choices. And so this woman's past is controlling her today, and her greatest fear became reality. She is known and she's unloved. Again, this can't be our church. Listen, I look around the room and I know people's stories in here. Here's what I know about people in the room. There's people in the room this morning that have been fired because they had character. Think about that. They've been fired from their job because they always did what was right. There's people in the room that have experienced verbal, physical, spiritual, sexual abuse from someone they're supposed to love. There's people in the room that have been told to their face as an adult that they're the weakest link on the team at work, or maybe you're a student and you've been told you're the weakest link on the team. There's people here that have had hurtful words thrown into their face, and some have experienced difficulty because of injury or sickness. And for some in the room this morning, the pain of the past is defining today. Jesus knows, listen, he knows everything about this woman. He knows that this woman is fully known and that she's completely unloved by the world around her. She's been rejected, but Jesus is at the well because he wants this woman to experience something she's never experienced before. So what does Jesus say? In verse 7, he says, "Give me a drink." The woman immediately, in our reading, if you saw it, she highlighted right away, right? There's barriers here. You don't talk to me. You're a Jewish man. I'm a Samaritan. This isn't how this actually works. But again, Jesus doesn't care about barriers. He cares about her heart. Jesus says this, if you knew the gift, look at it, verse 10. If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked and he would have given you living water. Why does he define this water as a gift? A gift is free, right? If someone gives you something as a gift, you don't pay for it or reimburse them for it. And so Jesus is saying, I'm here to offer you something living, something free, something eternal that'll well up within you and satisfy the deepest parts of your soul. Jesus is saying, what I want to give you will quench your thirst, your spiritual thirst, like water quenches a parched mouth. I'm going to meet you. I'm going to take care of you. So she has to wrestle with this question. Where is she looking to satisfy this thirst? Where are you looking to quench your thirst? That's a question we all have to wrestle with as we interact with Jesus in this very moment. Where are we looking to find satisfaction? Because here's what God is saying. Here's what Jesus is saying to this woman, that every single person, every one of us is actually on a search for the very thing that's going to satisfy our God-ordained thirst. We have a God-ordained thirst. How does the woman respond? She actually changes the subject if you in the reading, and she started talking about the well as if it's, Jacob's well, and he drank from this well, and his sons drink from this well, and his livestock drink from this well. But look at what Jesus says in verse 13 again. Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water again." You see, Jesus is like, yeah, this well is cool. Jacob did build it. Yep, his sons drank from it. He drank from it. His livestock drank from it. But here's the thing, lady, like this will only quench physical thirst. As an example, he could say to this woman, "Hey, how many times have you been coming here? Oh, you come here every day? For your whole entire life? You've been coming here every day because you're thirsty? You've been coming here every week because you're thirsty? Every month because you're thirsty? Every year, all year because you're thirsty? Like this is part of your rhythm of life because this is how physical thirst is quenched for you." I can't help but wonder what location you've been running to quench your thirst. Where do you run day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year to quench your thirst? You see, we have this lie that we believe. And the lie that we often believe is this, is more of what I have that doesn't quench my thirst will somehow quench my thirst. Did you hear that? I have all this stuff. I run to this place. I want to do this. And I keep doing these things, and they never actually quench this God-ordained thirst in me. But maybe if I do more of it or have more of it, somehow the things that don't quench my thirst will somehow quench my thirst. Here's what Jesus is saying. Nothing outside of you can quench this God-ordained thirst within you. There's nothing. And so the woman says what? At the end there, she says, "Give me this water. I want to be satisfied." So we talked about our greatest fear, which I think is rejection. That we would be known by somebody and in return not loved. But what would be your greatest desire? I think our greatest desire is acceptance. That we would be fully known and fully loved. Let's check this out in verse 16. This is where the story gets crazy. Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying I have no husband, for you've had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." And the woman said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, he who is called the Christ. And when he comes, he will tell us all things." And Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Let's talk about the flow of what we just saw. Jesus started out by saying, "I want to give you living water." She responds by saying, "Give me the living water." Right? That's the flow so far. And then Jesus says this, "Go get your husband." What's he doing? Why is Jesus changing the subject? You offered her living water. She said, "Give me the living water." And you say, "Go get your husband." Just give her the living water, man. Right? Doesn't that make the most sense to us? Why would you delay giving her what she wants? Why would you delay the reason this appointment's even happening? This is so important to the story, church. Jesus identifies the exact place she's been looking for living water. In other words, before you can drink the good news of the gospel, your deepest wounds have to be addressed. And so when Jesus says, I want to give you living water. She says, give me the living water. He says, great, go get your husband. Here's what Jesus is saying. I'm identifying the place that you run to try to find satisfaction. He identifies this woman's deepest wound. You see, here's what he's saying. You've been searching to have your thirst quenched in your relationship with men. What was the interaction? Oh, I don't have a husband. Oh, I know, Jesus says. Do you remember that? Oh, yeah, I know. You've had 5. And the person you're with now is not actually your husband. You see, we see something in this woman that is clear of each and every one of us. Just like this woman, we all want acceptance and we all want approval. So think about the lies that she's believing. Think about this broken cycle within her heart it's been on repeat over and over and over again, trying to find satisfaction in somewhere outside of Jesus. And so Jesus calls out the wound. He addresses the greatest pain in her life. You see, here's what's happening in this cycle in this woman's life. You thought husband 1, maybe he'll accept me and maybe he'll approve of me. Oh no, he didn't? Okay, maybe husband 2 will accept me and approve of me. Oh no, he didn't? Oh, maybe husband 3, he'll accept me and approve of me. Maybe husband 4, he'll accept me and approve of me. And then husband 5, the same thing. And then eventually, I'm not going to try the marriage thing. We're just going to do sex for rent together, and hopefully it'll work out. Just like this woman, everyone in the room this morning has a God-ordained, legitimate need that needs to be met. And the problem is when we attempt to meet that legitimate, God-ordained need in an illegitimate way, it creates a repetitive pattern of destruction in our life. And for this woman, she was going after man after man after man. And your cycle might look different, but make no mistake, we all have them. Where have you seen the destruction in your life? Her rearview mirror is the men in the relationships. What's your rearview mirror? Where's the broken cycle present where you have this God-ordained legitimate need that needs to be met and needs to be satisfied, and you're looking for something to satisfy it? And so you look and you search and you try, and for some reason it's never being met. You see, before you can embrace God's grace, you have to be honest about the dark places of your soul. What Jesus is doing with this woman is so beautiful. He's accepting her. Now, let me be clear. What Jesus is doing here is different than what the world does, okay? Acceptance in our world is tolerance. There's no tolerance from Jesus. And when I say we want to accept every single person here, here's what that means. It's okay for you to walk in and not be okay. It's really good. It's really okay. But it's not okay to stay there. And we're going to walk the road with you, right, to compel you to press into Jesus in a greater way. That's what he's doing right here. Well, the world says acceptance, you be you. Jesus isn't doing that. He's loving her to where he wants her to be. It's a beautiful picture of what he's actually doing. So here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, I see you, I know you, and I'm still here. I'm not running. I'm not going away. I'm here. Most of you people in the room know my wife and I's story. We have 3 adopted children out of the foster care system. I have a picture, my favorite picture of my kids of all time is this picture right here. This is like 5 years ago, okay? You don't even get those moments with your kids where everyone loves each other and that happens like once every 4 years. That's this moment, okay? So this picture right here is Easter Sunday like 5 years ago, okay? But here's what's true about my kids. I don't share a whole lot about them because some things we just don't need to be public. But we were their 5th foster home. They reached out to 160 homes in Lansing and nobody wanted them. And they've all been victims in a variety of ways. Our youngest son, Johnny, the one in the green pants there, he was born 100% deaf because his body just didn't fully develop. His lungs were half the size. He was a whopping 1 pound when he was born because of things and decisions that mom and dad were actually making. At 18 months old, he didn't even have the strength to even sit up. Here's what's true. They all have deep wounds. They've all experienced heavy trauma. And here's how that plays out for my youngest, Johnny. He's a really good kid, and he's most of the time super easy. But there's times when he gets really angry. And when he gets angry, it's about something that doesn't make sense. Like it lacks logic, like something so small that doesn't even matter. You know what I mean? Like, there's things to be angry about. This isn't that. And you can't speak to him about it. Like, logistically, like nothing makes sense. And you can't really quite calm him down sometimes. And so over the last few months, starting in the summer, here's what I've been doing. When he gets angry like that, I ask if I can grab his hand and we walk to another room. And I sit down and I put him on my lap and our faces are face to face. And then I just hug him. And he's wailing, and I say, you're known and you're loved. 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 And eventually his anger turns to sadness, and he just sobs in my shoulder. There's trauma. He doesn't know. He can't speak about it. And we leave that moment of him being known and being loved, and we walk out of the room and we just go back to doing life, and he's good to go. Adoption's a beautiful thing. Can I just to tell you, adoption's incredibly challenging. And people don't know it unless they've done it. Something about being known and loved allows us to move forward differently, right? It's okay that you need to freak out. Come here, freak out right here. And we'll get back and we'll just love life and live together and enjoy it. Here's what I'm learning. And I see anger in myself sometimes. Sometimes behind anger is just straight sadness. Have you experienced that before? There's just sadness. And that's what it is with him. And he doesn't know. His body's just responding, right? He's been a victim. What we're seeing in John chapter 4 is such a beautiful picture of the gospel right before our eyes. And what we're seeing is so important is that Jesus is saying this, hey, woman, even in your mess, I'm present. Even in your mess, I'm pro you. Even in your mess, I'm going to meet you right here. You see, even in your mess that you came to this morning, God, Jesus, he wants you. That's the exact place that he wants to meet you in your deepest wounds, in your deepest heartache, in your deepest pain. Is it possible there's not a safer place to be known than in the arms of Jesus? But is that not the very place that we want to hide and conceal? You see, here's what's happened in our culture in West Michigan. We've robbed ourselves of healing from our wounds and choices because we want to hide the very thing that Jesus wants us to embrace. We're pro at it. Like we're incredible. And we've done it over and we've done it over and we've done it over again. So here's what happens. We have wounds, we have pains by choices we make, by things that have been done to us, that have shaped decisions we've made in our future and all that stuff and all sorts of stuff that we've experienced. But here's what happens when we refuse to embrace, when we refuse to walk into it, to bring it into the light, to expose it like Jesus is actually doing, we actually lose. We lose. I don't want you to lose. I don't want to lose. So Jesus points out the men. He's pointing out the very thing that makes her guilty before God. It's her sexual sin. You've been looking for satisfaction from all these men outside of the Lord. And here's what Jesus is doing. He's exposing every detail of her life. But here's the problem. Just like this woman, each and every one of us is a sinner. And all sin deserves the wrath of a holy God. But Jesus knows this. The only way to move forward is to actually break the cycle. Why? Because the gospel will never be so beautiful to you until it meets you in your greatest wound. The beauty of the gospel just blows our minds in that moment because there's never been a spot where we can truly be known, accepted, approved of, in light of all that I've done. You're going to offer me that? And he's like, yeah, let's go together in relationship. So if you were the woman at the well today, what would have Jesus graciously exposed in your life? No, seriously. What would Jesus expose in your life? Name it. Do you see it? What we have pleaded in your life. Okay, yeah, you want the water? Okay, before you drink this water, let's talk about this. X. What is that you'd want to talk to you about? Your wound might be like this woman. It might be sex-related or bad relationships or money or advancing the corporate ladder or addictions or bad habits. You have these legitimate needs that need to be met for acceptance and approval. But here's the thing. No matter what your thing is, the thing behind that thing is what needs to be identified. And this is what makes Christ so beautiful, because when we can identify our greatest wounds and our greatest pain, and when we can freely share, yeah, I've been looking for it and whatever, it's not the thing that's providing what you want. It's the thing behind the thing, and what you're really looking for is acceptance and approval, and Christ is saying, I'm giving it to you. You're free to be known in relationship with me. How does the woman respond? Man, she says, sir, you must be a prophet. And he's like, yep, that's me. And she's like, you just nailed me. Look at verse 20 with me again. Our fathers worship on the mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain or in Jerusalem will we worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. The woman said in verse 25, I know that the Messiah is coming, he who is called the Christ. And when he comes, he will tell us all things. And Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. That's who I am. Notice the woman changes the subject again. She changes it to talk about the temple and worship, and Jesus wants to trump that by saying, oh, the hour is coming or is now here when Christ dies on the cross, that we no longer need a physical building, a temple to go worship God. We can go in spirit right to him ourselves. And so we learn in this conversation that Jesus is after your worship. He's after your heart and your brokenness to ultimately win your worship. And here's what happens. We all worship something. Whether you know Christ or not this morning, you're a worshiper. God's created you that way. But here's what happens. What you worship is motivated by his grace, his acceptance, his approval of you, or it's motivated by your wounds and your pain and your trauma. Those are the two options. The motivation of who and what we worship is really incredibly important in our life. And so Jesus is after our worship. Everyone is searching for salvation somewhere. Everyone has faith in something. So the woman says, oh, the Messiah is going to come. He's going to tell us all things. And Jesus is like, yeah, that's a cool guy, and that's me. Oh, that makes sense because you told me everything I've ever done. So let's talk about it. If we never talk about who we are because we're afraid of rejection, we live our whole life in fear. And many of you are in that spot. You are living life in fear. What if I told you there's a greater option? If we willing to press into the pain of acceptance, here's what happens next. There's just freedom on the other side of that. There's freedom from the pain. There's freedom from the wound. There's freedom from trauma. And freedom is this, is fully knowing and fully loving. So let's check this out quickly. In verse 28, look at it with me. It says, so the woman left her jar. She went away into town, and she said to the people, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? They went out of town, and they were actually coming to him. Jump to verse 37. Let's go 39 instead. It says, many Samaritans from that town believed in him, Jesus, because of the woman's testimony. He told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him and asked him to stay with them, he stayed there for 2 days, and many more believed because of his word. And they said to the woman, it is no longer because of what you have said that we believe, for we have heard it for ourselves, and we know that this is indeed the Savior of the world. So think about this woman, church. She's not been known. She's been known and unloved. She meets Christ. She's accepted. She now has this unique freedom to where what? She's not defined by her choices and her failures anymore. She's been accepted from holiness. And how does she respond? She responds by keeping her jar at the well, leaving it behind, running all the way back into town, and starts telling everyone that's always despised her and talked bad about her to her face or behind her back. And she starts telling them all about this Christ who told me everything that I've ever did. Everything. So in her life, we learn a really important life lesson. And that life lesson is this, is that freedom starts where honesty begins. Freedom starts where honesty begins. She's running right back into town. Her life's been transformed by this acceptance, by this love, and by this grace of Jesus. She's known. And so we see this in this woman, our gospel takeaway, that you are fully known and fully loved by Jesus to fully know and love like Jesus. So here's the beauty of this. Is that Jesus didn't run from the mess at the woman at the well. He ran to the woman at the well. And as a church, we don't want to run from somebody's mess. We want to run to the mess. And so what I mean by that is this. An alone person, a hurting person, a wounded person is an emergency for us as a church. It's an emergency. We've said from the very beginning when we planted Redemption Church, like this value here, this priority, presses in on everything in our culture. No church really has spoken about wanting this value. We planted Redemption Church on April 5th, 2015. God's done a lot of work, church. Tons of people have come to know Christ. A bunch of people baptized. People have shared their faith with family that's come to know Christ. Chains have been broken. Marriages have been restored. You've given away, over $600,000 to church planting and missions. But growing up here, I could see this thing that everyone's fake. I don't have time for that. I want genuine, I want authenticity, I want something that's real. And so we planted Redemption Church to be a spiritual hospital. And let me hear, just to be clear, we haven't always got it right. But a spiritual hospital that those who don't have it all figured out can come and interact with the gospel, with the good news of Jesus. And every time you go to a physical hospital, you go there and you're honest. We go there because we need to go. We need help. Something's not right in our body. And so you walk in, you check in, you fill them in on all that you're facing, and eventually, 18 hours later, you get to see a doctor who's going to walk through all the symptoms of what you're experiencing and then tell you what's actually happening within your body. And here's the plan. Here's how we'll get after it. Here's an antibiotic, or here's some other kind of treatment that's going to help provide healing to yourself. And guess what? You experience freedom, right? We only go to the physical hospital if we have to. I believe our church should be the same way. That we come to this church because we need to be reminded of how awesome and incredible our King is. Because apart from him, all that we have is our wounds. And he's the one who's met us in those wounds. And he's the one who's gonna save us out of those wounds. And he's the one who can bring healing to those wounds. So we are now free to be with our family as a church and just love one another with everything that we have, no matter what you bring to the table. So what does this mean, every person known? It doesn't mean that everyone's going to know everyone. That's impossible. It does mean this, that everyone's going to be known by somebody. And we have all sorts of ways for you to be known. It's just an invitation today. Church, are you with me in what I'm talking about? I know, it's hard, right? Yeah, maybe. Opportunity to jump in. Invitation for you to be known, to be relationally connected, for you to grow spiritually, for you to be cared for. And there's many vehicles to do that. You can jump into a small group, a chance to connect with people weekly. We open up the Bible, and there we get to grow as disciples. We get to be spiritually challenged. We get to be prayed for. We get to be connected. We get to be cared for that. Jump in men's ministry, jump in women's ministry, jump on a team. Create some other organic experience that you need if that doesn't work for you. But here's what we can't do. We can't sit back, not accept the invitation to get involved anywhere in anything, and then throw the stone that the church doesn't care for me. That doesn't work when you've not taken the step to be known. When you've not taken a step to press into community. So I just want to encourage you, jump in. You're invited in. We're invited to be known. We're invited to be loved because we've been fully accepted by the Lord. And so we have a God who loves you deeply. He loves you deeply. Do you know him? And I wonder if there's someone that's at the well this morning, and Jesus is exposing your life and in your past, that's defining your today, and there's freedom for you in the acceptance of Christ. There's nothing like it in the history of the world. And so I just want to encourage you to step into relationship with him. Here's the challenge. Be known, experience acceptance and freedom, or live in fear. What's going to win the day in your life? Let's pray. Jesus, I want to thank you for your love for us. Lord, you're such a faithful God. And just like this woman at this well, Lord, you're in a spot where you have, you've done so many things in the lives and the hearts of people in this room. But Lord, you changed that one woman's life, and then all of a sudden that whole city was changed. Can that be true here, Lord? Will we break down the cultural barriers that exist? That no one can know my dirty laundry, that no one can know the worst of that I've done, because I don't know if I'll be accepted. I want to pray that this church here, Lord, which will be a church, Lord, where people step in, where people step forward, where people engage in a way of being known, so in that you, in the gospel, can do a greater work in our community. And then what will happen, just like the woman at the well, Lord, is you'll start to do a greater work in our city through the life and the ministry of Redemption Church, Lord. And we'll see more and more people coming to Christ, and more chains broken, and more marriages restored, and just, Lord, do what you do over and over and over again, the things we've already seen you do in our short history. So we're just praying for big things. I want to pray for people in the room that don't know you, or that today's the day that their past doesn't dominate their future. Their past doesn't dictate their final destination, but you do, God, that you're ready and waiting to interact with them, to work through their wound, to be present, and to faithfully love them to the end. In your name, amen.